In a quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and endless fields, a girl named Emily lived a simple life. Her days were filled with helping her family, attending school, and spending time with friends. Life was uneventful, but she was content. Until one day, everything changed. A new family moved into town, taking residence in the largest house on the hill. They were wealthy, sophisticated, and carried an air of mystery. The town buzzed with curiosity, and, soon enough, everyone was talking about the son of this family. He was tall, handsome, and had a smile that could charm anyone. He was everything Emily had never seen before. He was everything she never thought she would desire. From the moment she first laid eyes on him, something inside her shifted. She felt an inexplicable pull, a longing she couldn't understand. He became the center of her thoughts, the focus of her dreams. She imagined what it would be like if he noticed her, if he cared for her the way she was beginning to care for him. But deep down, she knew it was only a fantasy. Emily watched him from afar, too shy and too scared to approach. She would see him at the town square, at the small cafe where she worked on weekends, and sometimes by the river where he would sit, lost in thought. She learned his name from whispered conversations. Ethan. It suited him, she thought. Ethan, however, was unaware of her existence. His life was filled with parties, social gatherings, and the company of a beautiful girl named Olivia. Olivia was everything Emily was not, confident, glamorous, and always the center of attention. She and Ethan seemed perfect together, and they quickly became the talk of the town. Emily's heart ached whenever she saw them together. She would pretend not to notice, but every glance exchanged between Ethan and Olivia felt like a dagger to her chest. Still, she didn't let herself cry. She would tell herself that she was happy for Ethan, that he deserved someone as perfect as Olivia. She kept her feelings locked away, hidden even from herself. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Emily's feelings grew stronger. It became harder to ignore the pain in her heart, the longing that consumed her every thought. She tried to focus on other things, her studies, her family, her friends, but nothing could distract her from the torment of loving someone who didn't even know she existed. She would often find herself by the river, sitting on the same bench where Ethan used to sit. She would close her eyes and imagine what it would be like if he were there with her, if he took her hand, if he told her he felt the same way. But when she opened her eyes, she was always alone. At night, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with her. Why couldn't she just forget about him? Why did it hurt so much to see him with Olivia? She knew it was foolish to love someone who didn't love her back, but she couldn't help it. Her heart refused to let go. One day, everything changed. Ethan's father's business, once thriving and prosperous, suddenly collapsed. There were rumors of bad investments, of debts that couldn't be repaid. The family, once the wealthiest in town, lost everything. The grand house on the hill was sold, the expensive cars were gone, and the parties came to an abrupt end. The town watched in shock as Ethan's family went from riches to rags. But the biggest shock of all was when Olivia left him. Emily heard about it from the whispers in the cafe. Olivia couldn't stand the idea of being with someone who had nothing. She broke off their relationship without a second thought, leaving Ethan devastated and alone. Emily's heart broke for Ethan. She knew what it felt like to lose everything, to feel abandoned and alone. She wanted to comfort him, to tell him that she was there for him, that she cared. But she was too scared, too shy to approach him. She didn't know what to say, how to help. Days passed and Emily continued with her life, but she couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. She would see him around town, no longer the confident, charming boy he once was. He looked lost, defeated. The spark in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a sadness that seemed to weigh him down. One day, as she was walking home from the market, she saw him sitting alone on the bench by the river. He was staring at the water, his shoulders slumped, his hands clasped together as if he were holding on to something that was slipping away. Without thinking, Emily walked over to him. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she couldn't turn back now. She had to do something, say something. She couldn't stand seeing him like this. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Ethan looked up at her, surprised. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he smiled weakly. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You don't look fine," Emily said, sitting down next to him. "You look like you need someone to talk to." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to say. Everything's gone wrong. I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still you," Emily said gently. "You're still the same person you were before. It's just, things are different now. But that doesn't mean you're any less important, any less worthy." Ethan stared at her, his eyes searching hers. "Why are you being so nice to me? I don't even know you." "You don't have to know someone for them to care," she said quietly. "Sometimes people just care because they see someone who needs it." Ethan didn't reply, but something in his expression softened. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely alone. From that day on, Emily and Ethan started spending more time together. It was slow at first, small conversations, shared moments of silence, but gradually they grew closer. Ethan began to open up to her, sharing his fears, his regrets, his hopes. She listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding. Ethan started to see Emily in a new light. She wasn't like Olivia. She didn't care about money or status. She cared about him, for who he was, not for what he had. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced before, a sense of being valued for himself, not for the image he projected. As their friendship deepened, Emily's love for Ethan grew stronger. She didn't expect anything in return. She was just happy to be there for him, to be the one he turned to when he needed someone. But with each passing day, the hope that he might one day love her back became harder to ignore. Ethan, too, began to feel something he hadn't expected. He found himself looking forward to their time together, to the way she made him feel. Safe, understood, cared for. But he was afraid to admit it, even to himself. He had been hurt before, and he didn't want to risk losing the one person who had stayed by his side through everything. Despite the growing bond between them, Emily's heart was still heavy. She loved Ethan with all her heart, but she was terrified that he would never see her as anything more than a friend. She knew he was still hurting from his breakup with Olivia, and she didn't want to push him, didn't want to ruin what they had. But the longer she kept her feelings hidden, the more they consumed her. She would lie awake at night, replaying their conversations in her mind, wondering if there was any chance he might feel the same way. Every time he smiled at her, every time he thanked her for being there, her heart would ache with the longing she couldn't express. One day, as they were sitting by the river, Ethan turned to her and said, "I don't know what I would have done without you. You've been my rock through all of this. I don't think I could have made it without you." His words should have made her happy, but instead, they filled her with a deep sadness. She smiled, hiding the pain behind a mask of happiness. "I'm just glad I could be here for you," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "You're amazing, you know that? You're the best friend anyone could ever ask for." The word friend cut through her like a knife, but she didn't let it show. "And you're a great friend too," she replied, forcing a smile. But deep down, she knew that being just a friend would never be enough for her. As time went on, Ethan started to rebuild his life. He found a job, started saving money, and slowly began to regain some of the confidence he had lost. Emily was there for him every step of the way, offering encouragement and support. But as Ethan grew stronger, the distance between them seemed to grow as well. Ethan started spending more time with his new friends from work, certainly. Here's the continuation with Emily's name throughout. As time went on, Ethan started to rebuild his life. He found a job, started saving money, and slowly began to regain some of the confidence he had lost. Emily was there for him every step of the way, offering encouragement and support. But as Ethan grew stronger, the distance between them seemed to grow as well. Ethan started spending more time with his new friends from work, going out more often, and becoming more independent. Emily noticed the change, and it terrified her. She had become so used to being the one person Ethan relied on, the one who was always there for him. The thought of losing that closeness, of being left behind, was almost unbearable. One evening, after Ethan had cancelled their plans to meet because of a work event, Emily found herself sitting alone by the river. She stared at the water, her heart heavy with the fear that she was losing him. She had given everything she had to support him, to help him through his darkest days, and now that he was finding his way again, she felt like she was fading into the background. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She had to be strong, she told herself. She had to be happy for him, even if it meant losing the one thing she wanted most, his love. The distance between them continued to grow, and Emily felt more and more like she was slipping away from Ethan's life. She knew she had to do something, to say something before it was too late, but every time she tried to bring it up, the words stuck in her throat. She was terrified that if she confessed her feelings, she would lose him completely. Finally, one evening, as they were walking home from a late-night coffee, Emily couldn't hold it in any longer. They were walking side by side, the night air cool and crisp, when she suddenly stopped. "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling. "There's something I need to tell you." Ethan turned to her, his expression concerned. "What is it? You look upset." She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. I've been meaning to tell you this for a long time, but I was too scared. I didn't want to ruin what we have, but I can't keep pretending anymore." Ethan's brows furrowed, and he took a step closer to her. "What are you talking about? You can tell me anything, you know that." Emily looked down at her feet, unable to meet his eyes. "I've loved you for a long time, Ethan. I've loved you since before everything happened. I didn't say anything because I knew you were with Olivia, and I didn't want to get in the way. But now, I just can't keep it to myself anymore." There was a long silence, and Emily felt her heart sink. She finally looked up at Ethan, fearing the worst. He was staring at her, his eyes wide with shock. You love me." Emily nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I do. I have for so long. But I know you don't feel the same way, and I don't want to force you into anything. I just needed you to know." Ethan didn't say anything for a moment. He looked away, running a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with what to say. "I don't know what to say," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I care about you so much. You've been such an important part of my life. But I don't know if I can give you what you're looking for." Emily felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. She had expected this, but it didn't make it any less painful. She forced a smile, even though it felt like her world was falling apart. "It's okay," she said, her voice breaking. "I didn't expect anything. I just wanted you to know." Ethan reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I don't want to lose you. You're too important to me. Can we just keep things the way they are?" Emily nodded, even though it felt like she was being ripped apart inside. "Of course," she said softly. "We can stay friends." But deep down, she knew that being just a friend would never be enough for her. After that night, Emily tried to pretend that everything was fine. She kept spending time with Ethan, kept being the supportive friend he needed, but something inside her had changed. The love she had kept hidden for so long had been exposed, and now it felt like a constant ache in her chest. She watched as Ethan continued to rebuild his life, growing stronger and more confident every day. He started dating again, going out with different girls, but none of them lasted long. Every time he talked about his dates, Emily would smile and nod, pretending to be happy for him, but inside, she felt like she was dying. Her friends noticed the change in her, noticed how quiet and withdrawn she had become. But she didn't tell them what was wrong. She didn't want anyone to know how much she was hurting, didn't want anyone to pity her. Days turned into weeks, and the pain didn't lessen. If anything, it grew stronger, more unbearable. She couldn't escape it, couldn't stop thinking about Ethan and how much she loved him. It was like a weight that pressed down on her every minute of every day. One night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she realized that she couldn't keep living like this. She had to do something, had to find a way to move on. But the thought of losing Ethan completely, of cutting him out of her life, was too much to bear. She didn't know what to do. She felt trapped, caught between the love she couldn't let go of and the pain that was slowly destroying her. Emily's breaking point came on a cold winter's night. She and Ethan had gone out for dinner, a casual, friendly meal like so many they had shared before. But this time, something was different. Ethan seemed distant, distracted, and Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. After dinner, as they walked back to her place, Ethan turned to her, his expression serious. "We need to talk," he said, his voice heavy with something she couldn't quite place. Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it? Is something wrong?" Ethan hesitated, then sighed. "I've been thinking a lot lately. About us, about our friendship. I don't know how to say this, but I think we need some space." Emily felt like the ground had been pulled out from under her. "Space? What do you mean?" Ethan looked away, clearly uncomfortable. I feel like things have been different between us since that night you told me how you feel. I don't want to hurt you, but I think we need to take a step back, give each other some room to breathe. Emily's chest tightened, and she struggled to keep her voice steady. "Are you saying you don't want to see me anymore?" "No, that's not what I mean," Ethan said quickly. "I just think we need to cool things down for a while. I don't want to lose you, but I think this is what's best for both of us." Tears filled Emily's eyes, but she blinked them away. "If that's what you want," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "If that's what you think is best, then okay." Ethan looked at her, guilt and sorrow in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." "It's okay," she said, forcing a smile that felt like it would break her. "I understand." But she didn't. She didn't understand at all. After that night, Emily and Ethan drifted apart. She stopped calling him, stopped texting, and he did the same. The silence between them was deafening, and it felt like a piece of her heart had been ripped out. The days passed in a blur, each one more painful than the last. She would see Ethan around town sometimes, but they never spoke. They were strangers now, and the realization of that was more than she could bear. She tried to move on, tried to fill the void in her life with other things, her work, her friends, anything to distract her from the aching emptiness that had taken hold of her. But nothing worked. Nothing could erase the memory of the love she had lost. One day, as she was walking by the river, she stopped at the bench where she and Ethan had spent so many hours talking. She sat down, her heart heavy with the weight of everything she had lost. As she stared at the water, she thought about how much she had loved Ethan, how she had given him everything she had, only to be left with nothing. She had been willing to give up her own happiness for his, but in the end, it hadn't been enough. Tears filled her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself cry. She cried for the love she had lost, for the pain she had endured, for the life she had imagined but would never have. But as the tears fell, something inside her began to shift. The pain was still there, still raw and aching. Here's the continuation with Emily's name incorporated and further developed. But as the tears fell, something inside Emily began to shift. The pain was still there, still raw and aching, but it wasn't all consuming anymore. Slowly, she realized that she had been holding on to something that was never hers to begin with. She had been clinging to a dream, to a love that was unrequited, and in doing so, she had lost herself. She knew that she couldn't keep living like this, trapped in the past, in a love that would never be returned. She had to find a way to let go, to move on, to reclaim her life and her happiness. It wouldn't be easy, but she knew it was the only way forward. As the days passed, Emily started to focus on herself, on rebuilding her life without Ethan. She threw herself into her work, her hobbies, and spending time with her friends. She even started going to therapy, where she learned to process her feelings, to understand why she had held on for so long, and to find a way to heal. It was a long and difficult journey filled with moments of doubt and despair, but slowly, she began to feel like herself again. The pain of losing Ethan was still there, but it was no longer the defining feature of her life. She began to see that there was more to her than her love for him, that she was strong, capable, and worthy of happiness. Months passed, and Emily had come a long way in her healing journey. She was stronger, more independent, and had started to rediscover the things that made her happy. She had even started dating again, cautiously opening her heart to the possibility of new love. One day, as she was walking through the town square, she heard someone call her name. She turned around and saw Ethan standing there, a hesitant smile on his face. He looked different, older, more mature, but there was something in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "Hi," he said, his voice soft. "It's been a while." "It has," Emily replied, her heart beating faster. She hadn't seen him in months, and the sight of him brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad. "Can we talk?" Ethan asked, his expression serious. "There's something I need to say." Emily hesitated, unsure if she was ready to face him again, but something in his eyes made her nod. "Okay," she said, "let's talk." They walked to the bench by the river, the same one where they had shared so many conversations. For a moment they sat in silence, both of them lost in their thoughts. "I've been thinking a lot about us," Ethan finally said, breaking the silence, "about everything that happened and how I handled things. I realize now that I made a mistake. I pushed you away when you were the one person who was always there for me." Emily looked at him, her heart pounding. "Ethan, you don't have to—" "No, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I was scared. I didn't want to admit that I had feelings for you because I was afraid of getting hurt again. But the truth is, I've missed you. I've missed our friendship, and I've missed you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "Ethan, I know I've hurt you," he continued, his voice filled with regret. "And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want you to know that I care about you more than I ever realized. I don't want to lose you again." Tears filled Emily's eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of pain. She had waited so long to hear these words, but now that they were finally here, she didn't know what to say. "I care about you too, Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "but I've been through so much and I've had to learn to let go. I'm not the same person I was before." "I know," Ethan said, his eyes filled with understanding, "and I don't want to take away the progress you've made. I just want to be a part of your life again, in whatever way you'll let me." Emily looked at him, searching his eyes for sincerity. She could see the truth in his words, the vulnerability in his expression. He was different now, just as she was. They had both grown, both changed, and maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to start again. "Let's take it one step at a time," she finally said, a small smile forming on her lips. "We'll see where it goes." Ethan smiled back, relief washing over his face. One step at a time sounds perfect. From that day forward, Emily and Ethan began to rebuild their friendship. It wasn't easy. There were moments of awkwardness, of hesitation, as they navigated the new dynamics of their relationship. But there was also a sense of hope, a feeling that maybe this time things could be different. They spent time together talking, laughing, and sharing their lives once more. Emily found that the pain of the past had started to fade, replaced by a new sense of closeness and understanding. Ethan, too, seemed more open, more willing to share his thoughts and feelings. As the weeks went by, the bond between them grew stronger. There was still uncertainty, still the fear of getting hurt again. But there was also the possibility of something more. They were no longer the same people they had been before. Both had changed, and with that change came the potential for a new kind of love. One evening as they sat by the river watching the sunset, Ethan turned to Emily and took her hand. "I know we're taking things slow," he said, "but I need you to know that I'm serious about this. I'm serious about us." Emily looked into his eyes and saw the sincerity there, the same sincerity that had been missing before. "I believe you," she said softly, "and I'm serious too. But we need to make sure we do this right, that we don't rush into anything." "I agree," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. "I'm willing to take as much time as we need." They sat there in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to purple. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt hopeful. She knew that whatever happened, she had the strength to face it, and that she wouldn't be alone. Months passed, and Emily and Ethan continued to grow closer. They took things slowly, building a foundation of trust and understanding that hadn't been there before. Emily had learned to value herself, to prioritize her own happiness, and Ethan respected that. As they spent more time together, the love that had once been unrequited began to blossom into something real, something mutual. Ethan was no longer the boy she had once idolized. He was a man who had faced hardship, who had grown and changed, just as she had. One day, as they were walking through the park, Ethan stopped and turned to Emily. "I love you," he said simply, his eyes full of emotion. "I've loved you for a while now, but I wanted to make sure I was ready to say it." Emily's heart swelled with emotion, and for the first time she felt no fear, no hesitation. "I love you too," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I always have, and I always will." They embraced, the past finally laid to rest, replaced by the promise of a future built on love, trust, and mutual respect. They had both been through so much, but in the end, they had found each other, two souls who had weathered the storm and come out stronger on the other side.